Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Nestled deep in the rugged mountains of Colorado, Thomas Rivers thought he'd left chaos behind. His 12-acre sanctuary, shared only with his loyal Labrador Max, was his fortress of solitude. But when an overreaching HOA from a nearby development declared war on his independence, Thomas knew peace wouldn't come without a fight. Thomas Rivers, a 45-year-old former Marine-turned-furniture designer, had finally found peace in the quiet solitude of his 12-acre property, nestled in the rugged mountains of Colorado. After leaving behind the chaos of city life and a bitter divorce, his off-the-grid home became his sanctuary. Built with his own hands over a decade, the property boasted a cozy log cabin, a small workshop, solar panels, and a sprawling garden. Thomas's only companion was Max, his loyal Labrador, who was as much a guardian of the property as he was a constant source of company and joy. The property sat on the edge of a dense forest, bordered by a meandering stream that marked the natural boundary of his land. For years, the surrounding area had remained untouched wilderness, but that changed 2 years ago when developers broke ground on a new housing project called Sunny Ridge. The development quickly grew into a gated community of pristine homes, perfectly manicured lawns, and rigid homeowner association rules. Although the complex was over a mile away, its presence cast an invisible shadow over Thomas's life. At first, Thomas barely noticed the new neighbors, apart from the occasional sound of construction equipment echoing across the valley. The residents of Sunny Ridge rarely ventured into the wilds near his home, and he was content to let them live their lives while he enjoyed his independence. He assumed they would leave him alone, but this assumption was shattered one crisp morning in late spring when an official-looking envelope arrived in his mailbox. The letter bore the logo of the Sunny Ridge Homeowners Association and opened with a curt salutation. "Dear Mr. Rivers, it has come to our attention that your property falls within the future expansion plans of Sunny Ridge. As such, you are required to comply with HOA regulations. Please remit your outstanding fees of $600 and address the following violations." The list of alleged infractions was almost comical: unauthorized solar panel installation, an unapproved garden fence, and unsightly property elements. A vague phrase that likely referred to his rugged log cabin and handmade furniture scattered across the yard. Thomas couldn't help but laugh as he read through the letter. His property wasn't part of Sunny Ridge. In fact, his cabin had been there decades before the first shovel hit the dirt for their development. Shaking his head, Thomas dismissed the letter as a mistake. Still, out of curiosity and a sense of responsibility, he decided to call the HOA to clarify the situation. That's when he first encountered Agnes Richards, the president of the Sunny Ridge HOA, who introduced herself with a sharp and authoritative tone. "Mr. Rivers," Agnes began, "your property has a direct impact on the aesthetic and property values of our community. While it may not currently fall within our boundaries, it is included in our planned expansion, which gives us the right to enforce compliance." Thomas responded calmly, though irritation simmered beneath his composure. "Ms. Richards, my land is private property, purchased outright over a decade ago. Your development didn't even exist back then. I am not, and never will be, part of your association." Agnes was undeterred. "That may be true for now, but your proximity to Sunny Ridge means you share a community footprint. Our master plan includes properties like yours. It's in everyone's best interest to align with HOA standards." Thomas ended the call, determined not to let her pushy demeanor ruin his day. He figured that would be the end of it. But as the days passed, the weight of the situation lingered. The thought of his independence being threatened by a group of strangers and their arbitrary rules ignited a spark of defiance in him. Unbeknownst to Thomas, this was only the beginning of a battle that would test his resilience, his patience, and his understanding of what it truly meant to stand his ground. Days after Thomas's terse exchange with Agnes Richards, things began to escalate in ways he hadn't anticipated. The first sign was subtle, yet irritating. Another letter from the HOA appeared in his mailbox, stamped "Final Notice." This time, it reiterated the demand for $600 in dues, alongside a warning that failure to comply would result in fines and potential legal action. Thomas, shaking his head in disbelief, tossed the letter into the growing pile of HOA correspondence on his kitchen counter. Later that week, a municipal inspector arrived unannounced, clipboard in hand, and a puzzled look on his face. The man politely informed Thomas that multiple complaints had been filed regarding unsafe structures and unauthorized installations on his property. Thomas showed him the permits for his solar panels and cabin, which satisfied the inspector. The man even admitted, with a hint of embarrassment, that the complaints seemed frivolous. Still, it was clear the HOA was intent on making Thomas's life as difficult as possible. Thomas relayed these developments to his attorney, Jennifer Hole, during a phone call. She advised him to take proactive measures, urging him to install security cameras and post private property signs to deter any further intrusions. Thomas took her advice seriously and spent the following weekend mounting cameras around the perimeter of his cabin and hanging signs at every visible point along his property line. The tipping point came one evening as Thomas reviewed footage from the newly installed cameras. On the grainy black and white screen, he spotted Agnes herself wandering across his property with a camera in hand. She moved methodically, snapping photos of his fence, his solar panels, and even the garden where Max often lounged. Thomas's blood boiled as he watched her blatant trespass. She seemed completely unfazed by the warning signs, as though she believed she was untouchable. The next night, she returned. This time, Thomas was ready. As Agnes crept closer to the cabin, Max, lying quietly on the porch, suddenly sprang to life. With a deep, booming bark, the Labrador charged toward the intruder. Agnes froze for a moment, her camera still in hand, before turning and fleeing in a panic. In her haste, she tripped, dropping her camera onto the rocky ground where it shattered into pieces. Scrambling to her feet, she barely made it to the edge of the property before Max stopped at the boundary, his growls reverberating into the night. "Are you out of your mind?" Agnes screamed from beyond the fence, visibly shaken. "You could have killed me with that dog." Thomas, stepping onto the porch with arms crossed, smirked as he replied, "You're lucky I didn't call the sheriff." "Consider this a warning. Stay off my land." Agnes pointed a trembling finger at him. "This isn't over. You'll regret this," she shouted before storming off, leaving behind her broken camera as evidence of her trespass. Thomas wasted no time contacting Jennifer. Together, they filed a complaint with local authorities and began drafting a request for a restraining order against Agnes and the HOA. While Thomas hoped this would bring an end to the harassment, deep down he knew Agnes wouldn't back down so easily. Within a week, his fears were confirmed. Another letter arrived, this time not from the HOA, but directly from Agnes's attorney. She was suing him for $4,000, claiming damages for the broken camera and emotional distress caused by his aggressive dog. The audacity of the claim left Thomas speechless. For the first time, he realized the lengths Agnes was willing to go to assert control. And so, the conflict grew, pulling Thomas further into a legal and personal battle he never sought, but now had no choice but to face. The lawsuit over the broken camera was just the beginning. As Thomas prepared his response with Jennifer's help, another bombshell landed in his mailbox, a formal legal complaint filed by the HOA itself. This new suit accused Thomas of damaging the aesthetic integrity of Sunny Ridge and claimed that his property's appearance was reducing the value of nearby homes. The HOA demanded compensation for these supposed losses, along with a court order requiring Thomas to bring his property into compliance with their guidelines. Thomas couldn't believe the lengths Agnes and her HOA were going to. With his frustration boiling over, he met with Jennifer to strategize. She advised filing a counterclaim, not just for the harassment and legal costs he'd already endured, but for trespassing, defamation, and emotional distress. She also suggested including a public records request to obtain evidence of HOA misconduct. On the day of the first court hearing, Thomas walked into the courtroom armed with a meticulous collection of evidence. Jennifer had left no stone unturned. The stack of documents included satellite imagery proving his property was never part of the Sunny Ridge development, permits for his solar panels and garden structures, and detailed footage from his security cameras. Each video showed Agnes brazenly trespassing, including the now infamous incident where she fled from Max and dropped her camera. The HOA's attorney began with the argument that Thomas's property, while technically outside their boundaries, still affected the visual harmony of the neighborhood. His outdated structures and unsanctioned installations are an eyesore, the lawyer insisted, and they devalue the modern homes of Sunny Ridge. Jennifer countered with precision. Your Honor, my client's property predates Sunny Ridge by over a decade. It is not, nor has it ever been, subject to HOA jurisdiction. Furthermore, we have clear evidence of harassment, trespassing, and unfounded legal actions designed solely to pressure Mr. Rivers into compliance. She presented the security footage, highlighting Agnes's multiple intrusions and the incident with Max. When Agnes herself took the stand, Jennifer's questioning was relentless. Mrs. Richards, were you aware that Mr. Rivers' property is private land and not under your HOA's control? Agnes hesitated, her composure cracking under the weight of her lies. Well, it's adjacent to our community, so we have a vested interest in ensuring it aligns with our standards. Agnes stammered. Jennifer didn't let up. Did you personally trespass on Mr. Rivers' property on multiple occasions, as shown in these videos? Agnes squirmed, trying to spin her actions as necessary inspections, but the judge wasn't buying it. With a stern expression, the judge addressed her directly. Mrs. Richards, HOA jurisdiction is not a license for harassment. This court does not condone your repeated intrusions on private property. The turning point came when Jennifer presented financial records obtained from the public records request. These revealed that the HOA had misallocated funds for legal fees to pursue frivolous claims, including the lawsuit against Thomas. This evidence not only undermined their credibility, but exposed the HOA to potential legal scrutiny from its own members. By the end of the hearing, it was clear the tide had turned in Thomas's favor. The judge dismissed the HOA's complaint, calling it unsubstantiated and overreaching. Furthermore, the judge scheduled a separate hearing to address Thomas's counterclaim against the HOA and Agnes. As they left the courtroom, Jennifer smiled at Thomas. This isn't just a victory, Thomas. This is leverage. They've overplayed their hand, and now it's our turn to set the record straight. Thomas nodded, feeling a mix of relief and determination. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, he saw a clear path to reclaiming his peace. With the HOA's initial claims dismissed and the judge clearly unimpressed with their tactics, the focus shifted to Thomas's counterclaim. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer meticulously built the case, consolidating a mountain of evidence that painted a damning picture of the HOA's overreach and Agnes Richards' personal vendetta. At the next hearing, Jennifer presented a comprehensive argument outlining the HOA's repeated violations. She emphasized their trespassing, harassment, and misuse of resources, which not only targeted Thomas but also misled other HOA members. Several residents of Sunny Ridge came forward, providing written statements and even testifying that they had no knowledge of or support for Agnes's actions. The highlight of the proceedings was a subpoenaed recording from an HOA board meeting. In it, Agnes could be heard ranting about the need to bring that hermit in line, admitting that the HOA's complaints were part of a strategy to pressure Thomas into compliance. This revelation shattered any remaining credibility she had and left the courtroom in stunned silence. Faced with mounting evidence and growing dissatisfaction from her own community, Agnes attempted a last-minute settlement. She offered to drop all claims and proposed a public apology in exchange for Thomas withdrawing his counterclaim. But Thomas wasn't interested in hollow gestures. He instructed Jennifer to push forward, determined to hold the HOA accountable and set a precedent for others facing similar harassment. The judge's final ruling was a resounding victory for Thomas. The HOA was ordered to pay $30,000 in damages for harassment, trespassing, and legal fees. Agnes Richards was personally held liable for $10,000 due to her role in orchestrating the campaign against him. The court also issued a permanent injunction preventing the HOA from taking any further action against Thomas or entering his property without explicit permission. The aftermath was equally impactful. Agnes resigned as president under pressure from the HOA board, and the remaining members began overhauling their governance practices. A new president, Ryan Ellis, reached out to Thomas, expressing regret for how things had unfolded. Ryan acknowledged that Agnes's actions had gone unchecked for too long and promised a more transparent and fair HOA moving forward. For Thomas, the ruling brought more than just legal vindication. It was a reaffirmation of his rights as a property owner and a declaration that no amount of bureaucratic bullying could force him to give up his independence. As he stood on his porch that evening, watching the sunset over the mountains, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Max lounged beside him, tail wagging lazily, as if sensing his owner's relief. "We did it, boy," Thomas murmured, scratching behind Max's ears. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, the silence deeper, and the peace truly his once again. In the weeks following the court ruling, the ripple effects of Thomas's victory began to reshape the dynamics of the Sunny Ridge community. News of the case spread quickly, both within the neighborhood and throughout the local area. Residents of Sunny Ridge, many of whom had grown wary of Agnes Richards' authoritarian leadership, began voicing their frustrations more openly. The newly appointed HOA president, Ryan Ellis, sought to repair the association's tarnished reputation. One of his first acts as president was to organize a community meeting, inviting residents to discuss ways to make the HOA more transparent and fair. At Ryan's request, Thomas agreed to attend the meeting, not as a member, but as a neighbor with first-hand experience of the HOA's overreach. When Thomas arrived, he was surprised to find himself greeted with handshakes and words of gratitude from several Sunny Ridge residents. Many admitted they had felt powerless against the strict rules and fines imposed by Agnes and her allies. One elderly couple shared their relief that Thomas's stand had brought long overdue change. "We've been afraid to put up Christmas lights for years," the husband chuckled. "Now we feel like we can actually enjoy our home again." During the meeting, Thomas shared his perspective, emphasizing the importance of respecting boundaries and promoting genuine community spirit rather than enforcing arbitrary regulations. His calm demeanor and practical advice resonated with the attendees, many of whom suggested new initiatives to foster a friendlier neighborhood. Ryan also took steps to address the fallout from Agnes's tenure. Misallocated HOA funds were accounted for, with refunds issued to residents where appropriate. The association began revising its bylaws to ensure greater accountability and prevent similar abuses of power. One key change allowed residents to opt out of non-essential HOA services, giving them more freedom to manage their own properties. Meanwhile, Thomas's relationship with his neighbors began to evolve. Residents who had once eyed him with suspicion now approached him with curiosity and respect. Some even asked for advice on solar panels and sustainable gardening, inspired by his off-grid lifestyle. Thomas hosted a small open house to demonstrate his systems, and to his surprise, it turned into a lively gathering. The privacy fence the HOA had built to hide Thomas's property became less of a barrier and more of a humorous relic of past conflicts. Children from Sunny Ridge often played near its edge, waving at Max as he patrolled the yard. Thomas couldn't help but smile at the irony. The fence intended to isolate him now served as a symbol of the truce between him and the community. Though he had never sought attention or cause, Thomas realized his victory had sparked something bigger. His stand against the HOA had empowered others to question authority and advocate for fair treatment. It was a reminder that even small acts of defiance could lead to meaningful change. Sitting on his porch one quiet evening, with Max lying contentedly at his feet, Thomas watched the sun dip behind the mountains. The land around him felt even more his own, not just because he had fought for it, but because he had proven that respect and boundaries mattered, both for himself and his neighbors. Thomas sat on his porch, the cool mountain breeze carrying the soft rustle of trees and the faint hum of his solar inverter. For the first time in months, he felt a profound sense of peace. The battle with the Sunny Ridge HOA was over, and the tranquility he had cherished on his land was truly his again. Looking back, Thomas realized how much the experience had taught him, not just about standing up for his rights, but about the power of resilience and community. He hadn't sought conflict, yet it had come to his doorstep, challenging his independence and resolve. The victory was more than just a legal triumph. It was a statement that no one, not even an overreaching HOA, could dictate how he lived on his own land. The fallout from the case had reshaped Sunny Ridge in unexpected ways. Under new leadership, the HOA shifted focus from strict enforcement to fostering genuine connections among neighbors. The reforms Thomas's stand had inspired were a testament to the impact of standing firm in the face of injustice. What surprised Thomas most was how his relationship with the community evolved. Neighbors who once viewed him as an outsider now waved as they passed by. Some had even embraced his sustainable lifestyle, installing solar panels or starting gardens of their own. The open hostility that once defined the boundary between his property and Sunny Ridge had transformed into mutual respect. Yet, Thomas's victory wasn't just for himself. It was for anyone who had ever felt powerless against an unjust system. His story became a quiet inspiration, reminding others that the law, when wielded with conviction, could protect those willing to fight for what was right. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mountains in a warm amber glow, Max let out a satisfied yawn at Thomas's feet. Thomas took a sip of his coffee and smiled, his gaze sweeping across the land he had defended so fiercely. "Not bad for a stubborn hermit, huh, Max?" He chuckled, scratching the dog behind his ears. The cabin, nestled in the heart of the wilderness, stood as a testament to independence and perseverance. Thomas knew that peace wasn't something you waited for. It was something you claimed, protected, and, when necessary, fought for. And for him, that made it all the sweeter.